Okay, good morning again, everyone. This is Nick Petro at the National Weather Service in Raleigh with your weekly impact weather briefing for Central North Carolina. And this briefing covers the period today through Sunday through the 27th of May. So let's go ahead and jump right into that weather briefing. This first slide here shows the overall weather pattern. And a couple features of note here is kind of a wet pattern here in the early week that we've been in. It seems like we've been in a wet pattern forever. But the other feature I want to call your attention to is this cold front here that will be dipping down, basically Wednesday time frame. When that cold front approaches, any time during the warm season when a cold front approaches, we always have to kind of take a closer look to see if there's any risk for severe thunderstorms with cold fronts. And sure enough, it looks like there could be an isolated severe storm or two for the midweek. Nothing major, but just could be an isolated strong storm with some higher winds. That's the midweek period. I'll talk more about that in a minute. And then for the late week, the Thursday and Friday time frame, that cold front's going to stall perhaps over the Carolinas, South Carolina. Although this H would suggest, and I'm looking in the lower left here, although this H would suggest high pressure building over, this front's going to be close enough where, we'll have to keep an eye out for some continued unsettled weather near that front, which could get up into the southern portions of central North Carolina. So even though it's a little deceiving, even though late week it looks like, oh yeah, we got a front coming through, high pressure building in, that's not necessarily going to be the case. We're not going to get much of a break in the rain chances even during that time frame. And then over the weekend, a couple things I want to call your attention to. This little L here, the Hurricane Center's keeping an eye on some disturbed weather over the western Caribbean, but also want to highlight essentially what this is a high pressure out over the western Atlantic, and then typically when you're in a pattern like this just basically brings lots of deep tropical moisture around this flow right here. So regardless of what happens to this area of low pressure, we're going to be in a deep southerly flow, which will bring abundant moisture to the southeast states. So either way you slice it, regardless of what we could see with what's happening down in the Gulf, we're going to be in a wet pattern for the weekend period. And again, this box in the middle kind of highlights it all. This pattern generally favors unsettled weather for central North Carolina all week long. The backdoor cold front during the midweek period could bring a risk for a few strong or isolated severe thunderstorms on Wednesday particularly. And then finally, we're keeping an eye on the Gulf Coast this weekend. Either way, it looks like a wet pattern for, like I said, unsettled. What about that severe thunderstorm potential? So, clearly in a warm season, anytime there's abundant moisture around, we can have thunderstorms, just thunderstorms in general. And that's what the very light green shading denotes, is that there could be thunderstorms around. But as you get to the Wednesday time frame in the lower left, you'll notice a little bit slightly darker shade of green. That is the marginal category, which basically marginal is this one right here, which basically suggests isolated severe storms are possible. Again, particularly I would say north of 85 and then north of the I-65 corridor. It doesn't mean severe storms can't happen south of there, but that's just the best chance for severe storms is basically from the Triad east to Raleigh and points north. So, and again, that's on Wednesday. All right. I wanted to take a brief moment to look at the past 7 days rainfall, and you'll notice this in the upper right. This is 7-day percent of normal. Okay, so normal. If we'd have got normal rain, it would have been this sort of like clear or light gray shading, kind of like what you see right here and right here. And then anything above that is above normal percentage, and anything below that, these reds and yellows would be drier than normal. So greens, blues, purples means wetter than normal, than we should have gotten for the last 7 days. And gosh, if you look basically over the coastal plain, we're talking 400%, 300 400% of normal precipitation. Along the Virginia border, anywhere from 400 to 600% of normal precipitation just in the last 7 days. The triad, western northwest triad, again, 400% of normal precipitation. And even these lighter shades of green and blue here, that's above normal precipitation as well. So what has that done to the rivers? Well, of course, all this heavy rain in the northwest triad, that all helped to feed into the Yadkin River Basin. And on the in the left side of this image, you can see here's the hydrograph for the Yadkin. And in fact, this past Saturday, it almost got into minor flood stage. Just stayed under minor flood. I mean, it got within 4/10 of a foot, but then came back down. So we're in good shape for now on the Yadkin. What about the Tar looking across up near the Virginia border? I'm thinking that there hasn't been, this is the Tar River at Rocky Mount. And clearly, some of the lakes perhaps may have caught, and then the Tar and the Roanoke, some of the lakes may have caught some of that rain. But what about the Cape Fear? We're seeing a gradual rise, but again, staying below flood stage on the Cape Fear of Fayetteville, and that's where there was, lesser amounts of rainfall. And then in the upper reaches of the Neuse Basin, so we're talking the Northwest Triangle, where we had 300% of normal precipitation. That's resulted in some gradual elevations on the Neuse River, and that is forecast actually to continue to gradually climb as we head through the rest of the week. Maybe looks like for now it'll stay below flood stage on the Neuse, but we're going to keep a close eye on that. So anyway, we're good for now, but keeping a close eye on trends. All right, so that's the river situation. As we look at the rainfall situation, today we're expecting the heaviest rain to fall near a weak boundary that's set up over the region. So essentially along and north of Highway 64 is where the heaviest rain today. We're expecting a little bit lightening of the rain on Tuesday, but then on Wednesday that backdoor cold front will be coming down. That'll increase our rain chances. And then as I pointed out earlier, with the backdoor front pushing almost towards the South Carolina border, that should keep the heaviest rain south of the Highway 64 corridor. And then looks like things are going to turn wet again over the weekend as that southerly flow pushes up abundant tropical moisture. So on the far right, in the lower right, if you look at the next 7 days, we're looking at about 1.5 inches or more of rain across much of central North Carolina. So it won't be raining the entire time, but I guess the best way perhaps to put it is unsettled. So rain from time to time. All right, what about those tropics? So this is the tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center 5-day graphical outlook, and you can see they're highlighting that area of disturbed weather over the Western Caribbean. They're giving it a 20% chance of formation over the next 5 days. Honestly, regardless of what happens with that, there's still going to be deep southerly flow and in lots of rainfall, no matter whether it forms into anything or not. There's and in fact, they highlight that here in the tropical weather outlook, highlighting this right here, regardless of development, locally heavy rainfall. I'm actually blanking that. You probably can't see that. But so anyway, let me clear that out here. So regardless of development, locally heavy rainfall is possible over western Cuba and Florida. And then that heavy rain will then just gradually make its way north over the weekend. So keep that in mind if you have outdoor plans for this weekend. All right. Looking ahead to next week, unfortunately, long-term indications suggest that this pattern that we've been in, this wet pattern, and then when you're in a wet pattern, just by the nature of a wet pattern, clouds and precipitation, generally that leads to cooler than normal temperatures. So the wet and cooler than normal pattern looks like it may continue over central North Carolina, even into next week. So anyway, that's the way that's shaping up for the longer term. All right. So wrapping this all up. For the summary, unsettled weather right through the entire week. It looks like Wednesday will be the best day for any kind of isolated severe thunderstorm possibility. Thunderstorms will be possible any day this week, but in terms of what's the best day for a severe storm, that's probably going to be Wednesday. And so far, area rivers look okay with all the rain that we've had recently, but we're keeping a close eye on trends. Looks like highs in the 80s and lows in the 60s all week long. And then we're keeping a close eye on the tropics. But regardless, the weather pattern will continue to favor abundant moisture coming at us from the south. So that's the way things are shaping up for this week. So anyway, that is the weekly weather briefing for Central North Carolina.